British songwriters, 12, a dozen. I decided to do a list of my favorite dozen British songwriters. And a lot of them start, the nucleus here is the 1960s when artists started recording their own work. They weren't relied just on other writers writing, like what happened in America with the Brill Building and, in England too, to some extent. But these are my favorite, and it's a subjective list. And you like lists, you like top 10 lists. This is top 12. I picked a dozen, and I pulled one record with a couple of exceptions to represent each artist. And these are the British Isles. It's England, Scotland, Ireland. These are my personal rankings. Are there others? Of course there are. Starting at number 12, from Ireland, Belfast, Van Morrison. He lived in Marin County, Northern California, for several years in the 1970s. Of course, Gloria alone, Here Comes a Night when he was with them, Brown Eyed Girl, but then he does this really mature album that mixes kind of this folksy, jazzy pop sensibility with three songs alone on here are killer lyrically and musically. And that is Cypress Avenue, Madame George, and Ballerina. Maybe not songs that you would normally hear others cover. Now, some may say, oh, the test of a great song is how many times it's covered and other people are covering it. I don't think that's the way I approached this list. In some cases, yes, but not totally. But even beyond this, with Moondance and St. Dominic's Preview and uh, just wonderful records. Jackie Wilson said that song alone. He wrote great rock folk songs over the years, and he does to this day. I don't always agree with some of his stylings and wankerisms and things, but I can't deny he's one of my favorite artists, and Van Morrison coming in at number 12. Coming in at number 11, Johnny Marr and Morrissey. Morrissey's lyrics are self-deprecating, humorous lyrics. You want to burst out laughing. I first heard uh, Reel Around the Fountain on that debut. This is a one of the greatest hits comps. There's so many records, so many songs you can really dive into. Um, you just haven't heard it yet, baby. The joke isn't funny anymore. Shoplifters of the world unite. Big Mouth Strikes Again. London Panic. Every album of the five records they made are perfect pop masterpieces. Johnny Marr's playing and his hooks, the way he writes the melodies. I mean, aside from the guitar playing, I mean, we could talk about musicianship on another video, but the way they collaborated together, it works and it works beautifully. And there are covers of Smith songs, and maybe not as many as some of the other artists I'm showing here, but I think they're one of the great teams of songwriters in the UK. So I'm giving them number 11 on my list because this is my own personal list. And right here, right now, in the moment, number 11 goes to Johnny Marr and Morrissey. Number 10, Cat Stevens. Now, Cat Stevens, he started out sort of a pop artist, almost like David Bowie. Both their first albums, I think they were both also on Durham London records, ironically, that were hold that pop sensibility, like the Tommy Steeles a little bit, like the Walker brothers, Scott Walker, a whole different Anthony Newley in a way. But when they started really kind of doing their thing that they wanted to do, and this wonderful record produced by Paul Samuel Smith, who produced all of his hit records in the early 1970s. Beautiful folk songs, beautifully arranged, lyrically very personal about song Father and Son, Wild World, Where Do the Children Play, Hard-Headed Woman, Miles from Nowhere. I just love these songs. Just the way these songs were used and other songs that he wrote in the movie Harold and Maude. It's just a beautiful blend of folk pop music and cinema. I love Cat Stevens. He's now been for like 25 years known as Yusef, but he kind of goes back and forth using his name and combining them together. His illustrative, physical illustration as well as illustrated lyrics are just so wonderful. So Cat Stevens is one of my favorite songwriters. My number 10 British songwriters on this list. Number 9 is David Bowie. Davy Jones, David Bowie. Maybe Hunky Dory and Ziggy Stardust, my favorite. Changes Alone is a wonderful song. I think Starman was the first song that I got hooked from this album. Life on Mars. His entire career, he's written brilliant songs. Everything. The Berlin trilogy, Station to Station, TVC 15, Station to Station, as I said. Even through the end of his career with Black Star and the darkness and lyrical and that, you know. You don't really hear a lot of people covering that stuff, but just he's got a hook sensibility too, as well as a good rock and roll with Rebel Rebel and the stuff he did later on in the mid-period. But everything, David Bowie, he always pushes the envelope as a performer, obviously, the way his records sound. But we're getting to the essence here of songwriting. These songs, especially of this period, have been covered and continue to be. Number 8 from Scotland, Donovan. Donovan seems to get less love now, but if you really dig in his songs, the people even that covered his songs, Herman's Hermits covered them, Jefferson Airplane, Super Session, Allman Brothers, songs like Mellow Yellow Sunshine Superman, but then you get into the deeper things, Hurdy-Gurdy, Epistle to Dippy, Wear Your Love Like Heaven. Read those lyrics of all the different colors he's describing in that. Jennifer Jupiter, the song Colors, and Catch the Wind, where he's doing the more, you know, people said he was sort of the British Isles answer to Dylan, but he was a different thing, a beautiful voice. Lyrically, the way he would blend these seemingly simple melodies, and of course with Mickey Most producing those records around this time, There Is a Mountain, Season of the Witch, and Lalania. And that's just on the greatest hits alone. But the deeper cuts, the cuts like Cat Stevens, written for children seemingly. You know, there's a little bit of a hippie, we call meditative hippie, meditative ethos in his records around in the 1960s, crossing over with the folk and the children's records to the psychedelic pop music. Just classic. And that is number 8, Donovan. Number 7 is Pete Townshend. Now, of course, the records are great, but I can see for miles and miles, and my generation really represent a lot of the 1960s. And then he matures. Oh, of course, on here you got Marianne with a Shaky Hand. Not many songs written about hand jobs, but it works on here. But Tommy, Quadrophenia, Who's Next? The songwriting, yes, the production, yes, the arrangements, yes, the thread of the storytelling. Very cerebral, very existential or psychological in a way. But Pete Townshend is a brilliant songwriter. It's unfortunate. Well, who knows? It depends on your point of view. Later in the 80s, when late 70s into the 80s, he seemed to have saved some of the best songs he wrote for his solo records. I mean, you know, I think his solo records are brilliant. And I think some of the later, like Face Dances, I mean, I don't think there's even a song on Face Dances by The Who called Face Dances. That was on his solo record. And it's a wonderful song. So Pete Townshend, so good, so good. Coming in at number 6, Kate Bush. Wuthering Heights, Alone, the first Bush song I heard in 1978. What a brilliant storytelling song based on the wonderful novel and film. On here you got Mother Stand for Comfort. You have Hounds of Love, obviously, and Big Sky, and Cloud Busting. Cloud Busting is a song that people don't really think of off the top. It's not one of their first picks, but it's such a wonderful arrangement and really lyrically beautiful. But the Ninth Wave, the whole suite of songs on side 2. Number 5, Keith Richards and Mick Jagger. Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. They had a little bit of a late start. Of course, Tell Me, Satisfaction. They had to use a Beatles song, I Want to Be Your Man, to have their first hit. I like this period. This is this kind of neo-psychedelic, Baroque psychedelic thing with songs like Ruby Tuesday, Lady Jane. And then you have an intense thing about real situations, real life. Have I Seen Your Mother, Baby, Standing in the Shadows, and Mother's Little Helper about, amphetamines. But Jagger and Richards obviously with Sympathy for the Devil and Street Fighting Man, and the sexual songs, Some Girls later on. The Stones seem to be more direct than the Beatles, and we always compare the Beatles and Stones, but they became good songwriters, brilliant songwriters, in fact. Number 4, one of the great British songwriters who just matured so quickly and matured a little bit ahead of his audience, and that's Elvis Costello. Going from the beginning with Allison and Pump It Up, and I Don't Want to Go to Chelsea. He just wrote these brilliant songs and had great arrangements. And the way he worked on his own harmonies, his double tracking harmonies, his hooks, he's a brilliant artist. Some of his songs are very intricate, yet they seem so simple. I brought this album out because the one song I remember when I first heard it thinking, oh God, that song's slow and boring. And I just didn't quite get it initially. But now I think it's one of the best songs he ever wrote. And that is Shipbuilding on here. And that has this great horn solo by Chet Baker on here. And I just think Elvis Costello is one of the greatest British songwriters, one of the greatest songwriters in pop music. Of course, later he would collaborate a little bit with Paul McCartney and then Burt Bacharach. But he goes in so many different directions, and I think he's always consistent. But again, sometimes it takes people to really latch on to his song. He is number 4 on my list, Elvis Costello. Coming at number 3 on the list of the greatest British songwriters, another team, Bernie Taupin and Elton John. Here's Bernie. What's amazing is how seemingly easily Elton took these lyrics and wrote these beautiful melodies that just, fit perfectly. Even though, unlike maybe Lennon McCartney early on and some of these other collaborative artists, weren't always sitting at the room at the same time at the piano or at the guitar or whatever. He would get these lyrics by Bernie and write these great melodies. I mean, for me, it was Your Song on that album and 60 Years On the self-titled 1970 album. On Mad Men Across the Water has some of the most beautiful lyrics from Tiny Dancer, Leave On, and Mad Men Across the Water alone. But all these albums going up through and beyond Brown Dirt Cowboy, Captain Fantastic, of course, Yellow Brick Road, that wonderful double album. They could do no wrong for about 6 to 7 years, I think. Even the soundtrack that doesn't get a lot of love, and it was in the cutout bins, it seems like the week after it came out, the soundtrack to the 1970 movie Friends, I think it was on Paramount Records, is a beautiful, beautiful album. Pick that up. Side 1, the orchestration of Paul Buckmaster. Side 2 is all orchestration instrumental, like score music. And that's brilliant. But side 1, the way he talks about, it's about this young British and French girl, like literally 15, 14-year-old, that run away together. And it's a very romantic coming-of-age film. That movie probably wouldn't get shown today, which is so bizarre, because it's a very innocent film, a very beautiful film. And the soundtrack, lyrically, and his Elton's songwriting and Bernie's lyrics are beautiful. So Elton John and Bernie Taupin coming at number 3. Down to the last 2. Number 2, those of you who know me can probably guess these two. Coming at number 2 is Ray Davies of the Kinks. One of the greatest solo British songwriters of pop music. Hands down, in my opinion. The song on this album, the final song on this album, Waterloo Sunset, might be the best British song of all time, pop music. I love the Beatles, but sorry, Ray, this may be it. He originally wrote it as Liverpool Sunset, and of course, I think that's the same year. What year did this come out? Same year as Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields. You got to get out of Liverpool. Stay in London, Ray. Stay in Muswell Hill or stay in London. His song, Days, David Watts. Every song he wrote is brilliant. Now, they weren't all fully realized in terms of the later versions of the songs or the later, maybe it's all the 70s things. But even Animal Farm, Arthur, of course, you can go back to the early rock songs of You Really Got Me, which is really kind of Dave-driven guitar intensity, and lyrically maybe not as interesting. But when Dave and Ray really collaborated, and when Ray wrote these lyrics, it was no turning back. A lot of it had to do with when the Kinks got banned from America. There's some union issues, and the Kinks couldn't come to America for about 3 to 4 years, from what, 66 to 69 or 70. And Ray really entrenched himself in writing about London life, the mundane London life, suburban life. Everything was very British. And I think some Americans didn't tune in or get it, although they had quite a few hit singles here. Later, obviously, Lola would be big. Victoria would be big, another song about England, about, the Queen Victoria period. That album, Arthur. Ray Davis is one of the greatest songwriters ever in the United Kingdom. And Kinks, so this is something else by the Kinks. One of their best albums. Can't go wrong with the Kinks, my second favorite band in the world. And obviously number one is Lennon and McCartney. You can't deny the greatness, and just they seem to do it so quickly early on. Think of this. Think of this. Think of this. This is basically written as a homework assignment. They had to come up with songs for Hard Day's Night like that. 1964, all the songs they wrote, all the records they put out, singles and albums, all of a sudden Ringo comes up with this line about it's been a hard day's night, whatever. Overnight, John, Paul, they write this song and they record it, right? Overnight, literally like that. The songs on here, obviously the early Beatles are really more of a Lennon-McCartney songwriting team, writing together most of the time. They would bring in ideas and then do it and fully realize it, and then in the studio. But think on here. If I Fell, John Lennon, and I Love Her, Paul McCartney, both two beautiful, slow, moody love songs and ballads. Can't Buy Me Love explodes. Hard Day's Night explodes. I Should Have Known Better explodes. Anytime at All. Not just John's vocals and just the way he screams and sings that song. The song is a great rock and roll piece. I'll Cry Instead. Things We Said Today and I'll Be Back are two songs that seem to be forgotten, but listen to those songs. Listen, not just the lyric of them, which is pretty simple, really. I love you. I'm leaving home. I'll be back. Love, break up, love, get back together. But the arrangements on those songs, John and Paul, with help of George Martin in the studio, obviously, in some extent, the arrangements on those songs are brilliant. So this is where, if you ever wonder why, like in the Grammy nominations, there's a song of the year and a record of the year, because one is just a song to the songwriters, one's the record, the way those songs were recorded and made and produced, and two different things. And the Beatles songs are great to begin with, but the records make those songs even better. Of course, there's been some great covers of all their songs, but think about it. 1964, this came out in the summer of 1964. 2 years later, only 2 years, you get this. You get Eleanor Rigby. You get John's I'm Only Sleeping. She Said, She Said. You get Paul's beautiful ballad of Here, There, and Everywhere. You get Good Day Sunshine from Paul. And Your Bird Can Sing from John. For No One by Paul. Dr. Robert from John. Got to Get Into My Life from Paul. And Tomorrow Never Knows. But all their career, the songwriting they did separate and together, whether they put their name on it, even when one wrote it and the other didn't, it was such a great team. And, the other would kind of tweak and help. Even when someone wrote almost everything, the other member would usually kind of say, yeah, that's good. Give them the reinforcement they need, or say, no, you got to change this lyric, or no, you got to keep that lyric. And so number one is Lennon-McCartney. That was an obvious number one out of all these. So I hope you like my list. There are so many others. And they're modern writers. Chrissie Hynde, American actually, but the Pretenders. P.J. Harvey, Tom York, Blunstone, Colin Blunstone, and the Zombies. So many more. You know, The Clash, Joe Strummer, Mick Jones. I could go on until we fade out. Can we fade out in the end of this video? I don't know how to do that. But thanks for watching. Mazzy loves you.